Welcome, listeners, to the NK News Podcast, recorded here in Seoul on May 16, 2018. I am your host, Jacko Zwetsloot. Joining me here in the studio today from NK News are NK bossman Chad O'Carroll.
안녕하세요.
Writer come extraordinaire Oliver Hotham.
Hi there.
And full-time DJ Thae Yong-ho.
안녕하세요.
Today, on our roundtable, we'll be looking at the latest news in North Korea over the last 3.5 weeks since we recorded our last post-Inter-Korean Summit extravaganza. Once again, NK News is proud to offer a 3 years subscription to one reviewer who reviews our podcast, not only at iTunes, but also other possible podcast platforms. There's a lot of P's in there. I like alliteration. Also, you can save $50 off your NK News subscription by using the code PODCAST at the checkout. Don't forget, if you enjoy our podcast, the NK News Podcast, please share it with others so that our listenership will continue to grow. All right, let's kick off with this morning. We woke up here in South Korea to news that North Korea had cancelled today's slated high-level working talks with South Korean officials because of somebody called Max Thunder. Dagyom, who or what is Max Thunder?
So North Korea informed the Moon Jae-in government of its decision to cancel the high-level inter-Korean meeting at around midnight today, citing the 2-week annual bilateral training exercise called Max Thunders between the U.S. and South Korea, which have been implemented since last week.
So Max Thunder's a kind of exercise?
Yeah, it's military exercise like Four Eagles and Key Reserve. Basically, air combat exercises conducted between the two countries, Washington and Seoul.
So we're halfway into the middle of Max Thunder, and all of a sudden we wake up and North Korea says, not coming to the meeting.
So we had in the statement that you referred to, well, the statement that Dagyom referred to, the North Koreans released that after they told the South Koreans, they said, we're not interested in the talks today, we're going to pull out because of Max Thunder. And then they suggested that, well, there's a possibility because of all of this nastiness that we will not be involved in the summit that's set to take place on June 12th.
Wow, that sounds dire. Now, is North Korea maneuvering here for some leverage advantage, or is the summit actually off? What do people think?
It's worth also adding that there were two statements by the North Koreans. There was the one in the middle of the night that was mainly about them complaining about the South Koreans, and then there was a second one by a North Korean diplomat and senior foreign ministry official, essentially squarely aimed at the United States, saying, these are all our grievances. We don't like Bolton. We don't like what he's been saying. We don't like the Libya comparison. And so we will reconsider the summit, is what they said.
But, I mean, if you look at what North Korea has done since January 1, it's provided a lot of concessions unilaterally. It's given up a lot of its bargaining leverage, unilateral offer to suspend missile tests, tests, nuclear tests, acceptance of the delayed joint US ROK drills. There's been lots of bits that it's been okay with. And I think this is the North Koreans ahead of the summit, just reminding the US it will refuse to be a doormat, and it still has teeth and it still has interests that need to be addressed by the US, especially when this summit does take place. And in addition, I mean, we haven't been able to confirm this yet, but there were reports in Yonhap last week about the fact that B-52 bombers would be involved in this drill. There are F-22 Raptors. Those aircraft, we don't know if the B-52s actually have been involved. There was a report today that they may have been dropped because of this complaint. But those kind of heavy and advanced aircraft, they don't really sit well with some of the things that were agreed at the Panmunjom joint declaration, which included, of course, trying to find ways to reduce military tension and so on. So it seems that the North Koreans are trying to remind Washington that, it still has very serious concerns of its own, and it's not going to just roll over.
It's almost as if Kim Jong-un doesn't know that the B-52s sang Love Shack.
Or Rock Lobster.
Well, but not so thematic. Love Shack. Anyway, you were going to say, Oliver?
I was going to say what's interesting about the foreign ministry statement is that it's very directed at certain people.
What did they say about Mike Pompeo? We're coming to him later on, but did they say anything specific about him?
They didn't specifically mention Pompeo.
So he gets a free pass.
Well, in theory he does, because they didn't deliberately mention his name, but they did poo-poo a lot of things that he's been saying. So there was a lot of hype about some comments that Pompeo made about how if North Korea agreed to a nuclear deal, there might be some kind of economic cooperation. He said the US would send its best private entrepreneurs into North Korea to help them with development, and the North Koreans today said, we are not interested in that. We would never ask for help from the Americans on our economy, because et cetera, et cetera.
Did they say anything about Bolton's mustache?
They did not. They called him a pseudo-patriot, though, which I quite like.
A pseudo-patriot?
Yeah, like the statement is partially single out John Bolton's. And I think the main purpose of issuing this statement is to criticize John Bolton. Yeah. And I don't believe the target is the Trump itself, the President Trump itself. So
they didn't reiterate calling Trump a dotard or anything? Then?
No, they didn't.
But Oliver noticed something interesting earlier, which is I've noticed is kind of it's been overlooked on Twitter and mainstream media, which was the huge focus on South Korea in this. You noticed
that was in the first statement.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you searched the term South Korea and it popped up dozens of times in that statement, which made it, and everyone just picked up on the fact that there was this implicit threat that the summit may be cancelled, but actually a lot of that seemed to be focused towards South Korea.
Interesting.
It was much more of a list of, it reminded me at least, and Fyodor as well, when we talked about it, of back in January when the inter-Korean stuff had just started to kick off.
Yes.
And the North had this kind of petty little thing where they were complaining about media coverage, and they pulled out a North Korean delegation was supposed to go to the South to visit some, I kind of feels like years ago. It was that cultural delegation. And the North Koreans cancelled it at the last minute, and everyone was saying, oh, well, this is the end, it all started off, but that's, and the North Koreans were complaining about media coverage and other things, and protesters, I think, as well. And, it all just kind of boiled over. I mean, what I was saying is the first statement kind of felt like a list of everything that South Korea has done wrong recently.
Right. So in the context of all that, then, I just want to take a quick straw poll of the three of you here. Will the June 12th summit between Trump and Kim in Singapore still go ahead? Dagyum?
Yeah, it's definitely go ahead, like from my understanding, because when you look into the statement issued by Kim Gae-gon, the statement issued by Kim Gae-gon is different from like KCNA commentary or spokesperson commentary of the like foreign ministry. It's quite low-key statement, so we have to like remember that this is not like high-key statement, and this is like strong criticism on the Trump administrations compared to the previous ones.
Okay, Oliver?
I think it's probably still going to happen.
Well, I hope it happens because we've got non-refundable tickets to the hotel bookings for the Shangri-La, where we're hoping the summit will take place so we can get ringside seats and non-refundable flights. So
I want to put on record here that I'm prepared to take a hit for the team and just go down and chill out at the Shangri-La if there's no summit. I think because the work still needs to go on here. I can take a few days off my work and go down there.
Oh, so boss, could you promise that we can still go? Even though it doesn't take place in front of
been
audience.
Put on the hot seat in the podcast.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks.
I have to make some consultations. But I mean, the problem with this is such a I actually know not much about the hotel except the price, but I just imagine we'll get there and be holed away in a conference room in freezing air conditioning and probably get like an hour a day to experience it. So it's going to be. We're not going to really see much.
Chad, moving on, what is going on in Wonsan? I see a story that you reported yesterday that over 170 buildings are being built on the Kalma Peninsula.
In January, Kim Jongun, in his New Year's speech, he mentioned that there was a new construction project going on in Wonsan, Kalma. Soon after that, the Daily NK reported that there had been some deployments of soldier workers, civilians out there, and then Curtis Melvin on NK Econ Watch picked up some activity on satellite imagery.
He's good with the satellite imagery.
Very good.
Yeah. Hi, Curtis, if you're listening.
Since then, we've been working with our partners at Planet Labs, who provide really good satellite imagery around the clock of the whole world, actually.
Oh, wow.
And they shared with us a very high resolution image that they've just recently been able to provide through a new high resolution satellite they've got in orbit.
Oh, fantastic.
and this is great product placement for them.
Yeah.
But the astounding thing was this image of the peninsula taken, I think, April 27th. I bothered to count all the buildings, and we knew that this was going to be a large project. North Korean media have been all over it, but there has been no real detail compared to previous construction projects of just how many buildings are going to be going up there. And yeah, there were over 170 buildings. Now, this construction site is over 4.5 kilometers long. It's up to about 0.6 kilometers wide. It includes a large artificial lake. It's built right adjacent to this brand new airport. You look at the KCTV video of these soldier workers, just like with this massive Yeomyong Street project a year or two ago, there are stadium-style lights overlooking it for soldier build workers to work through the night. It's a colossal endeavor. And we're talking about buildings on the hotel end of the spectrum, mostly at around 10 floors high, which is nothing by North Korean standards, but what's interesting is that the date scheduled for completion from sources we've heard on the ground has been said to be July 27th, Victory Day.
Very soon.
That would be, we're what, May 10th? What's the date today?
Well, it'll be today's the 16th, so it's just over 2 months from now, but it's just over 6 weeks from the Kim-Trump summit.
For any Brits who were alive in the late 80s, they'll know a show called Challenge Anneka, which was all about building things in rapid time against gravity, effectively. And that's the kind of thing that this would be. If they can pull it off by then, I'd be shocked. But
could you give us the dimensions of the whole project again? You said it was
4.5 kilometers along the beach from north to south, and then approximately 0.5 kilometers wide. It does shrink in parts. I would estimate, once it's done, high thousands, maybe even low tens of thousands in terms of hotel accommodation.
So these 170 buildings, are they more or less the same in terms of visible purpose and dimensions?
No, it's a variety. You've got these villas surrounding this artificial lake, and then you've got more mass tourism type stuff you might find in, is it Haeundae Beach in Pusan? Yeah, that kind of style. Another part of it, and then it looks like there's going to be loads of features in between. What's interesting though is it's literally adjacent to this brand new airport, so I mean, if they have one flight a day, no sound problems, but if it picks up and becomes like a booming tourist destination, that might annoy some people.
Well, no, that does lead to the question, does Wonsan really have the infrastructure to be a tourist hub?
Well, it will do when this is done and the airport finally starts to get some traffic. But what's been curious is that speaking to sources on the ground in North Korea and in especially the travel industry, it seems a lot of locals in Pyongyang are completely unaware of this project, even though it is being featured somewhat on state media. And no one seems to know what the intended purpose of it is. But some sources have said that it appears likely it's designed for South Korean tourists. Now, if you think about it, South Korean tourism to the north has been banned since 2008 when that...
banned from the South Korean side, I should point out.
Yes, when a South Korean female was shot dead as she walked through a military zone at around 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. Very, very strange case. But maybe there are negative optics associated with resuming tourism to places like Kumgangsan, where that shooting incident took place. You know, if North Korea was able to incentivize South Korea to resume tourism, then this could be a great spot to do it. Tristan Webb, NK Pro analyst, showed me on a map how it's if there was a direct flight or direct land route, it would actually be easier to get to this beach than to Pusan.
Get out.
So
starting from where?
Seoul, from Seoul. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a quicker route, and you have the added interest of being in North Korea.
You also have developing those types of routes is really the type of thing that the Moon administration is trying to do with these, creating this joint infrastructure,
and fixing the railways, which
all of that. It would be quite a good step to do that type of thing without the sanctions issue.
Yeah, and there are no sanctions prohibiting tourism. I mean, when you look at it, the way Tristan pointed out is that different governments have different travel advice on going to North Korea. The fact that there are countries that don't advise against it does show that it's clearly not sanctioned by the UN. And we obviously have Koryo Tours, YPT, all these firms allowing people to go. So it has potential. I'd definitely go if it opens. I love Wonsan. I've had a few great beach trips there. It's a very interesting place.
Yeah, I'd love to go because there's no way that I can go to North Korea except for tourism. So yeah, as a South Korean tourist, I would love to go.
Isn't Wonsan famous for those gasoline-cooked clams?
Nampo.
Well, yeah, exactly. We've had them in Nimpo. You can have them, I think, and you can even have them in the Moranbong Park in Pyongyang on any national holiday. I mean, you can see them pretty much anywhere, can't you?
Pretty disgusting.
Anywhere you've got clams and gasoline, hey, presto, barbecue.
Can't imagine Seoulites liking that.
I didn't like
they'll
that.
want Starbucks, Paris croissant.
Now, Wonsan Airport, it's a converted Air Force base that's now an airport, right?
So yeah, when I was looking at the Planet Labs imagery just yesterday evening, I noticed something really interesting, which is if you scroll down south from the entrance area to the new airport, there's this road which leads to a smaller runway. And if you follow that down about a mile away from the airport in a sort of wooded, secluded area, you can see about 15 or 20 military jets. And I then looked at it in Google Earth and you can browse back and it seems they've got a stock of military jets just ready nearby that could drive up this road and use the airport at any time. So it doesn't seem like it's a true civilian airport.
Right.
There's still a military dimension to it.
It's dual use.
It's dual use, and I'm sure sanctions geeks will be able to discern lots of violations that aircraft going there could create. But important to recognise is there's only been one international flight there since its quasi-opening in 2015, and that was a Asiana flight during the Pyeongchang Olympics to bring South Korean skiers to train at Mashik-ryong.
Oh, yeah.
My question about that is that an international flight? It's from South Korea to North Korea.
Right, so according to both Koreas, no, not international, but according to the UN, it might be deemed international because there's two Koreas in the UN.
I don't know. Hopefully the readers will write in and explain that.
Come back at me later.
But I'll just say something interesting about this airport that a North Korean diplomat once pointed out to me, which is that there's never actually been an official opening ceremony of Wonsan Galma Airport. Kim Jong-un has never visited the passenger terminal. He's visited the construction site while it was being raised, but there's never been an official ceremony. So while there have been some tourist groups that have gone there and it was used for this Asiana flight, it's very unlike most large-scale North Korean construction projects where there is a big red tape kind of opening thing. So I don't know. It's and if you look at it on the satellite imagery, one of the runways is actually incomplete. There was an air show there in 2016 organised by Juche Tours, and they actually used the second runway kind of beer festival area. And apparently the runway was kind of covered in pebbles that make it look like a runway. But it's when you look at it from above, it's in very, very bad condition.
Potemkin runway.
A fun way. Okay, so moving on. Thae Yong, yesterday you wrote a story on the South Korean Small Business Institute, or KOSBI. Apparently it is looking at ways to help North Korean businesses to incorporate global value chains. First of all, what are global value chains?
So, in one word, global value chain is the international fragmentations of productions, and we can simply understand as like all the functional activities required in the process of value creations involving more than one countries, the worldwide.
Is that one word?
Good question, Oliver.
It's one word, and I added explanations. It's basically business activities at the multilateral levels, including multinational corporations, so-called MNC.
How would North Korean businesses incorporate global value chains? Is that like, North Korea produces a part and then sends it to a car manufacturer in another country that gets used in it? Is that an example of that sort of thing?
It sounds like the type of thing that would be very sanctions vulnerable if it actually did happen. I mean, the project is a kind of interesting research project, and it shows that the South Korean government and South Korean government-linked bodies are kind of interested in examining these types of things, but it's not something that could feasibly be done right now because it would see North Korean factories working with South Korean companies exporting goods to China, Russia, and I mean, that is
Lots of red flags.
So many red flags.
Basically, my understanding is that the South Korean government has been preparing for the upcoming inter-Korean economic cooperations, even though we can't do anything because of tough international sanctions. But in a nutshell, the South Korean small and medium-sized business want to boost inter-Korean industrial cooperations, so that we can support North Korean economy to incorporate into global value chains based on enhanced inter-Korean economic cooperations. I don't think it's feasible as of now, but I think the Moon government eventually achieved the goal based on their agenda.
Right, but you'd have to get rid of international sanctions against North Korea.
Don't forget, Pompeo was talking just 2-3 days ago about how, if all goes well at this summit, there'll be all this US private investment. And so
yes, but I want to leave Pompeo till later on. I just want to focus on the inter-Korean side of this.
No, but the reason I raise it is because if he's talking about that would also require a massive reduction in sanctions, which is a precondition for what Dagyam's talking about. And it's interesting that the US of all players is, on a Fox Sunday interview, is talking about something that requires massive reversal of sanctions.
So Mike Pompeo basically said if North Korea achieved the full denuclearizations, they will allow U.S. company to enter the U.S. market and make
North Korean market
and make direct investment.
Okay.
That's the key point of Pompeo's remarks. If U.S. company can make an investment into the North Korean market, I believe South Korean company also can make direct investment. I think the key point is not about sanctions, but the problem is how North Korea can regain credibility, because the Kaesong industrial complex has been shut down twice, and all the companies was kicked out by the North Korea unilaterally. And I was there when they went away from the KIC back in 2016. The issue is not about sanctions. The issue is whether South Korean companies are willing to reinvest their money into North Korean market in spite of experience in the past.
But it seems as that there's been rumors of property values around Paju and the DMZ area really shooting up on the South Korean side. Yeah. And we're seeing it on the Chinese side as well, up in Dandong. I've been reading today all these state media reports from People's Daily, Global Times about how prices there have just been skyrocketing. And to me, it seems as frankly a bit of fickleness among a lot of people who are watching these scenes of inter-Korean symmetry, and they know the Trump one is ahead and believe that these summits alone mark the start of a major revitalization of North Korea and mass investment. But I kind of side with skeptics on this, because we've been through this so many times, and I think it does pay to be very cautious about making investments so soon.
But the way these things always happen is that unless you do have that type of optimism, when it does finally become obvious that this is actually going to happen, it's already too late.
Yeah, well that's true with Bitcoin in Korea.
Somebody's going to be the winner.
Somebody's going to be the first, and if you're,
Yeah, I also met South Korean business people working for big corporations. I can't name it, but their logic is that if U.S. company make investment in advance, they are willing to put money into North Korean market. That's their logic.
But the thing with North Korea that we've seen time and time again, and this is where my pessimism comes in, is that investors' rights, investors who succeed consistently lose out. That I'm not aware of anything beyond small to medium-sized enterprises who have, and most notably Chinese ones, that are able to turn a profit and repatriate their money without problems on a regular basis. You look at the history of North Korea importing Volvos in the 1970s. You look at the whole Orascom scandal, the issues with Orascom repatriating its profits. There are, North Korean finance business history is littered with examples of DPRK taking over.
We published a column about this yesterday, I think, by Peter Ward, shout out to Peter Ward, about this idea that there was going to be some kind of Vietnam-style reforms in North Korea. And it is tempting to get into the optimism of everything, but ultimately the reality is that is a completely ridiculous comparison. Yeah. North Korea doesn't really have any private property laws. The market regulations are non-existent. Everything is still essentially owned by the state. The history of companies like Orascom, as you mentioned, that have tried to go in and make, not even turn a profit, but just get their money back is so bad. I don't imagine any intelligent business person would consider North Korea as an investment opportunity.
And why does it help Kim Jong-un and his base of power if you have pockets of massive economic power emerging in the private sector in North Korea? Because pockets of economic power equate to pockets of political power, which equate to a challenge to Kim Jong-un's hegemonic leadership.
Well, yeah, and the fact that it's private industry that's supposed to go in there and help North Korea build, that...
If in some hypothetical situation you did have massive amounts of American aid into North Korea, I think that could also help Kim Jong-un and the elites a little. If elite power is guaranteed in North Korea, and then you have all of this foreign money coming in, I'm sure everyone gets rich.
But investment means eventually the profits of those investments flow back to the United States into the pockets of American capitalists. Now, the second that first transfer of dividends from North Korea to America is made, there goes that whole image of American money flowing into North Korea. That's why private companies invest. They invest to make money, right? Orascom were told when they wanted to get their profits out, you have to do it at the approved exchange rate. Now, if they tried that with the American companies, it could get ugly real quick. But I want to move on now to Thae Yong-ho, the former DPRK deputy ambassador to the United Kingdom, says that Kim Jong-un plans to expand special economic zones to inland areas and create some 14 zones structured like the Kaesong industrial complex. Why is this?
Personally, I believe that Kim Jong-un doesn't like the concept of specialized economic zones or opening market to the foreign companies, but apparently not. I was wrong in a way. So basically the reason why Kim Jong-un preferred to make special economic zone is that he believes that he can counter the influx of informations, and he can limit the free movement of North Korean by holding them into the special zones. Yeah, so it's a similar concept to the Kaesong industrial complex. Right. So 50,000 people work together at the same place, so they can limit the movement of Kaesong residents, and they can actually restrict the influence of the informations.
Okay.
So I think that's more easier for the North Korean government to counter people's in Changmadang. It's informal market.
Yes. So Kumgangsan, Kaesong, we're seeing the same thing again, basically, if Thae is right. Now, Thae also said that Kim Jong-un is not about to give up his nukes, no way, never, no how. What does he base that on?
So basically, Thae said that CVID is impossible. So instead of CVID, North Korea will pursue SVID. S here means sufficient instead of complete. So the reason why CVID is impossible is that Thae believed that to achieve the CVID, North Korea opened the countries to the external world, right? Through the multiple investigation and multiple process verifications. Kim Jong-un doesn't want to open his country to the external world. If he open his countries to the world, he believes that it will jeopardize the stability of Kim regimes by opening his countries to the external market, external world. So that is why the CVID is basically impossible, and it's not work for North Korea.
But does he want to open his heart?
Kim Jong-un.
Scrap that one there. Never mind.
Don't do like that.
So Thae is in effect warning South Koreans to be on their guard and not to be fooled by Kim Jong-un's charm offensive. But I understand that there's been some pushback.
Well, the pushback has come from North Korean state media, which has done its typical description of a defector as human scum, effectively.
인간 쓰레기.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was, I don't know, maybe Dagim or Oliver can provide specifics, but it was detailed within one of these complaints that implied that North Korea may not be willing to go ahead with the summit. It talked about, amidst all this rapprochement, South Korea is still allowing human scum to...
They said that human trash had been allowed to speak at the National Assembly. Obviously a reference to Thae, and that was was one of the reasons, it was part of the laundry list of grievances they had against the South, which reminds us a little bit of their complaints in January about how the South was allowing conservative outlets to slam the North. It's all that sort of typical North Korean stuff.
Now, speaking of North Koreans living in South Korea, let's talk about the 12 waitresses from the North Korean restaurant in Nimpo, China, who came here 2 years ago. They're now living lives in South Korea, but have never spoken to the media yet. There have been suspicions and calls from some sections of the South Korean left that these girls were somehow tricked or coerced into coming here, apparently to bring a political victory to former President Park's government around the time of the National Assembly elections in 2016. What changed last week?
So there have long been reports in South Korean, more left-leaning media all of last year that there was something more suspicious about this case. A lot of the stories about this case revolved around the manager of the restaurant and I can't remember his name.
Mr. Ho.
Reports that he had made some kind of deal with the South Korean National Intelligence Service. The reports were that he himself had always planned to defect, but the NIS encouraged him to bring the 12 women with him. And then the story goes that the women only found out they were going to defect when they arrived at the South Korean embassy in Malaysia. At that point, this is what the report on Thursday night in South Korean TV said, that then they were essentially told that if they didn't come to the South, they would be handed over to the North Korean secret police, who would be told that they'd been watching South Korean media and things like that. But what changed was these reports were out here for a while. The reports are not new really at all. What was new was that JTBC interviewed the manager and interviewed 4 of the women who had supposedly come as part of the restaurant defector group. And what was also different was that the Ministry of Unification actually lent a lot more credibility to those reports by saying, we're going to look into them.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? That the Unification Ministry has said, we will investigate this and get to the bottom of it.
I mean, how can the MOU, after 2 years, not know? It's absurd. The reason they don't know is because they've never been able to have direct access, apparently.
Yeah.
Because ostensibly, the restaurant workers refused to be interrogated by the MOU. Now, why they would refuse, who knows? The case is very, very strange. And I'll add, 2 things, looking at it from different ways. Adding credibility to this, I have a South Korean contact who lived in a Southeast Asian country in 2016, and that contact had a couple of contacts with North Korean diplomats, and doing their duty as a honest South Korean told their embassy in that country that they'd had these meetings just to be transparent. And an NIS official said, can you see if they'd be interested in defecting? So there seems to have been I don't know if that's common for the NIS to do that. I can't believe in this administration it would be. But that's just another data point that suggests that kind of activity was going on. At the same time, what is baffling about this from a reverse perspective is we know that the North Koreans have long demanded that these people be returned. Now, if we assume that they did honestly come to South Korea through their own volition, perhaps this could be a good way to placate North Korea. And again, this could be new management at the NIS who have encouraged maybe 1 or 2 of these figures who did have some doubts and question marks to come forward. Because let's remember, journalists have not been able to find these people for the last 2 years. They've had no independent contact with media. That they've suddenly got interviews on JTBC just days after the Inter-Korean summit, where family reunions were agreed on for August 15th, and North Korea didn't make a precondition of those women being returned, is very suspicious as well. The timing of it is very odd. And so, I mean, the conclusion is something very strange has happened here.
So I met a lot of left-wing defectors in organizations, and I've asked a lot of questions of 12 defectors from China, and no one has met 12 defectors interestingly. So, this is a special case. Even defectors doesn't know where about for 2 years, but they suddenly pop up and try to speak to JTBC and explain that, we were fooled by NIS. This is quite suspicious. Yeah.
The problem with this case is even if they do come out and say that we were abducted, or if they come out and say we weren't abducted, we honestly have no way of knowing what the truth is, because either their testimony could be being manipulated by North Korean secret police and intelligence services, or it's being manipulated by the NIS. It's almost impossible to, which I think is part of the reasons why it is such a strange case.
If some of them do genuinely want to go back and they're hindered by this refoulement law, that's equally absurd. That they're personal right to freedom of movement is being prevented by human rights law that assumes that they have a non-innocent intention. The fact that, as Dagyem said, the defector community has been largely unaware of who they are, where they are, the fact that journalists have not been able to find them, the fact that these are young ladies that not a single one of them has told a fellow student or acquaintance that they've met and it's leaked that way, suggests to me that they are being shadowed quite closely by relevant authorities who have an interest in preventing this case from escalating in one way or another. But that's just conjecture. I don't want to fall afoul of defamation laws here, but...
No, I went to the Monday news conference held by Min Byun, who advocated...
That's the Lawyers for Democratic Society
and
civic
other
group.
left-wing organizations to call for repatriation of 12 workers, restaurant workers. And this is my first time for me to see a large number of NIS agents at the news conference wearing masks and caps.
Really?
So that we can't see their face. And
What, sitting in the audience?
Yeah, sitting behind the audience, journalists. I mean, this is quite unique experience. There were only more than 20 people from civic groups, and there are also 10 people from NIS. So it's very tight security. The news conference was held under the very tight security.
So who they secure? Who's securing what? They're securing the Min Byun?
No, they just want to monitor the news conference. Yes.
Wow,
That was intense.
That's a bit heavy-handed.
That is pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
With caps and masks, you said.
Yeah.
Oh, is that someone with a cap and mask outside?
Good God, David, you might get it eventually.
Yeah.
Finally, I want to talk about Punggye-ri. Sometime between May 23rd and 25th, North Korea says that it will decommission its nuclear test site live on camera before the eyes of the world. It sounds great. What's the problem with that, Chad?
We were under the impression that scores of journalists would be going. To give you some context, last year at the April military parade when we went, there were probably about 80 journalists all told. Seems to me from the counts I've been able to confirm of people going that we're probably in the region now of 6 confirmed US journalists. And is it 4 or 8 South Koreans?
4 from one broadcaster and 4 from one agency. A total of 8.
Yeah, so that's 14, and that's all I've heard. That's it. Now, that's pretty significant. And the other thing is that originally North Korea, Kim Jong-un pledged to Moon Jae-in at the April 27th event, the summit. We understand that this communique came from that meeting, that international observers would be welcome to that. And there are so far 0. And as 38 North, Jeffrey Lewis have all been looking with this satellite imagery and seeing that the North Koreans are already taking steps to dismantle certain parts of the facility. It's interesting that they're cleansing it before journalists arrive. And the other thing that's interesting is when you're in North Korea, satellite uplink to do live footage, as far as I know, only exists in Pyongyang. I mean, when you look at the North Korean footage of the Panmunjom meeting, it was a day late because they just don't have the gear to get a live signal out of a remote place like that. Now, if you go up to if you go up to Punggye-ri, there is...
Which is really up in the north.
Yeah, unless they bring
east,
satellite trucks, which I don't believe they have. How are foreign media going to get a live signal? Now, with a demolition like this, the North Koreans have one chance to do this in front of the media, and that opens a certain amount of risk if you're doing a live broadcast and something goes wrong. Right. So it seems that there is an interest in having some control over the footage that comes out. And if they have to wait till they get back to Pyongyang, that could be 2-3 days on the train before that footage even gets an opportunity of being sent.
I mean, if it happens, it'll be on KCTV before it
probably
gets a broadcast, right? I mean, KCTV, it happens, they film it, they take it to Pyongyang, it's on TV the next day.
I think the crucial thing to bear in mind here is we don't really know what they mean by shutting this down. And there are entrance tunnels to this facility, and you could conceivably detonate 5 meters deep. What has really changed? That takes 5 meters of mining in future to reopen. Right. So while there may be some very dramatic images from the outside of the mountain, it could well be a very minor step. We have to see. But I can't reiterate enough how puzzled journalists who were invited have been by this, because there's one interlocutor who's very experienced in dealing with North Korean media teams has said that North Koreans are normally very, very organized about these things. And this is the second time in since April we've had an invitation reversed in very short amount of time with really no real explanation.
If a North Korean official listen to our podcast, please invite us to the event. Yeah, I really want to go, and yeah.
So thank you once again to Chad, Oliver and Thae Yong for coming on the NK News podcast and reviewing the latest news about North Korea. Don't forget you can listen to all of our shows as well as read full bios and show notes on our website www.nknews.org. NK News is the leading suppository of North Korean research, news and analysis, and we hope to see you there. And you can send feedback, comments, questions, or guest suggestions.
Cut. Jacko, you said suppository.
Oh, no.
You did a Tony Abbott.
You've done that outro so many times. Surely Arius can just copy-paste that in from...
Yeah.
I don't think you need to do that every time.
No, but I have to mention the free subscription again. We didn't
Whatever you do not say suppository.
Yeah.
Suppository. Don't say suppository.
Supposing I do. NK News is the leading repository of North Korean research, news and analysis, and we hope to see you there. And you can send feedback, comments, questions, or guest suggestions to podcast@nknews.org. Our podcast was produced, as always, by Arius Dare and facilitated by Chatter Carroll and Christina Lee. Lastly, a reminder that one random reviewer per week will win a free NK News membership, so please review us after listening on your favourite podcast platform and you might win. Also, you can save $50 off your NK News subscription by using the code podcast at the checkout. Thanks for listening and check us out next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.